I signed the last page and slid the stack of papers toward him. The district courthouse room was so quiet, I could hear the pen scrape across the table. Drew didn't look at me. He just stood, gathered his documents, then suddenly pressed a card into my hand. "You'll need this soon." His voice was low, steady, without a hint of emotion. I didn't ask. I just looked at him for a second, an expression with no blame, no attempt to search for answers. Then I closed the folder, the motion crisp and cold like a final period. When the door shut behind him, the first thing I felt wasn't pain. It was a small warning bell in the back of my mind. Something's off. But I wasn't ready to open that door yet. As I slipped the card into my wallet, my eyes paused for a beat. The card was in my name, but I was sure I'd never opened it. Not my bank. Not the kind of card I'd ever applied for. A detail sharp enough to make me hesitate, but not enough to make me stop. I was too tired to dig into anything connected to Drew on the day we divorced. To understand what that card meant in that final moment, I have to go back to the part of our life that seemed perfectly fine on the surface. I'm Kara Wells, a coordinator at a small clinic on the west side of the city. My job forces me to stay steady, managing schedules, organizing patients, sometimes handling emergencies so intense everyone else panics, but I don't. I'm tidy by nature, paperwork in order, finances even more so. And Drew Wells, a car salesman, is the kind of person who smiles easily at the whole world. He's generous to a fault. Sometimes so much that I couldn't tell if he was trying to show something or hide something behind that generosity. Some days he'd come home late, the cold air still clinging to his jacket, and he'd say it was just an extra shift. I believed him, never thought to question it. Our marriage, on the surface, was always calm. No big fights, no slamming doors. But calm doesn't always mean smooth. Distance doesn't always form from obvious hurt. Sometimes it builds from things so small you can't name them. I'm the planner. He goes with the moment. I like everything clear. He always said, "I'll take care of it." And every time he said that, a tiny space opened between us. Over time, those little spaces pieced themselves together into a wall neither of us noticed until it was already there. It's not that we didn't try to fix things. Some nights I'd sit down with our shared expense sheet and gently ask him about unclear charges. Drew would avoid my eyes, tapping his fingers on the table like he was searching for a way to change the subject. "Kara, I've got it." He said that so many times it turned into a splinter, not sharp enough to hurt outright, but every time I heard it, I felt shut out of my own life. I used to think I just needed to be more patient, but vague things don't disappear just because you want them to. They grow when no one is willing to say the truth out loud. The day we decided to divorce was as quiet as everything else between us. No yelling, no tears, just two people who had moved too far from their common ground, and neither wanted to admit it first. Drew looked at the papers and signed without his hand shaking. I signed without my heart shaking. We both knew there was nothing left to save, because it had been too long since either of us said what needed to be said. After the signing, when I walked out to the parking lot, the wind was strong enough to make the card in my wallet slip out a corner. I stood by my car and looked at it again. New, clean, unused, no notes, no message. Just Drew's strange sentence in the courtroom. "You'll need this soon." I tilted my head a little, that vague feeling rising like the sound of dripping water in an empty house. I couldn't tell if it was a warning or just the reflex you build after years of living with someone. I slipped the card back into my wallet. Neat, short, cold. If this was the last mess he left behind, I'd untangle it myself. I'd always been able to untangle everything, including this marriage. That night, when I got home, I set my bag on the table and opened my wallet again. The card Drew had given me sat tucked in a corner, harmless looking, but sharp enough to tap at my memory. I didn't touch it. I just looked, then closed the wallet. But in that moment, I knew I couldn't ignore the growing unease anymore. It pushed me back into a line of memories I'd tried to skim past, things that seemed small, but sharp enough to crack a marriage from the inside. In the early years, our joint account was simple. We talked about big expenses, and the small ones were up to whoever handled them. But then Drew started deciding more on his own. He'd withdraw money for things I'd never heard about. At first, I thought I'd just been busy and missed a few things. But it kept happening. One time I opened the statement and saw a charge for an expensive speaker. We already had one, and honestly, playing music from our phones was enough. I asked, "Why'd you buy this?" Drew didn't look at me. He just took off his jacket and gave me that familiar line, "Don't worry, I've got it covered." I stood there holding the statement, feeling like I'd been pushed out of the life I was supposed to be building with him. Not because of the speaker, but because of the way he spoke, as if I didn't need to know, as if my opinion didn't matter. Another time, he transferred a pretty large amount to another account. I asked about it, and he answered in that calm, throwaway tone, "It's nothing big. I'll take care of it." I don't know why, but each time he said that, my chest tightened a little more. Like he was slowly pulling a curtain between us over things that were supposed to be shared. The distance didn't come from one big fight. It came from all the small moments when he dodged my eyes every time I sat at the table and asked about our finances. "I'm busy. We'll talk tomorrow. It's nothing serious." Those empty answers stacked up like tiny stones, piling higher between us day after day. He worked overtime nonstop. Some nights he came home so late that I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and hear him set his keys on the stove as quietly as he could, like he was afraid of making a sound. I asked where the overtime money was going. He just said, "There's something I need to deal with." No details, no opening up. As if he was living a parallel life I wasn't allowed to step into. Then came the afternoon I found a strange bill in his jacket pocket. I was gathering clothes for the wash and happened to flip it open. A small slip of paper fell to the floor. A hospital name, psychology department, therapy fees. The patient's name wasn't his. It wasn't any woman connected to him. It was someone completely unfamiliar. In that moment, instead of jealousy, what hit me was a small shock. So who was he giving money to? Why the secrecy? And why had I never heard a single word about this? I wanted to ask, but when he walked into the kitchen, he looked so worn down I didn't even know where to start. I slipped the bill back into his pocket, said nothing. It became a sharp little slice and unanswered question hanging in the air. Things started pressing in on my own family when my mom, Linda, fell sick out of nowhere. One morning she called, her voice shaking. I took her to the hospital right away. Those days I worked and rushed back and forth caring for her. Drew seemed concerned, at least on the surface. He came to the hospital a few times, brought food, asked how she was doing. But the moment expenses came up, he pulled away again. "Kara, just focus on your mom. I'll handle my part." But what his part was, he never explained. I wasn't angry that he wasn't helping. I was angry because everything stayed so foggy, like he was afraid I'd find something out. My mom was sick, but the distance between us was what made me feel completely alone. I started re-examining every memory I'd let pass before. Drew was giving money to someone else. Drew hid his overtime shifts. Drew withdrew money without explaining. Drew pushed himself to the limit without saying why. Slowly, something became very clear. He wasn't cheating on me. He was carrying something heavy enough that he chose to hide it instead of share it. And that silence, not a third person, not any obvious mistake, was what pushed us to opposite sides. Not because I didn't want to understand, but because he never gave me the chance to. Standing in the kitchen that night after the divorce, I leaned against the counter and let my mind run through every detail again. The night wind slipped through the door frame, carrying the faint sound of the street. In a house missing one person, everything sounded louder, even the empty spaces I'd tried so hard to ignore. I won't deny it. There were times I was angry at Drew, angry that he made me feel unnecessary in decisions that should have been shared, angry that he acted like I was too fragile to handle the truth. But what angered me most was that he believed silence was a way to protect me. His fault wasn't doing something wrong. His fault was hiding it. I looked out the window, my hand resting on the part of my wallet where the card lay still. Drew wasn't bad. He just hid things. And what he hid, fear and responsibility, not wrongdoing, was what pushed us apart. I let out a slow, cold breath. It wasn't time to open that card yet, but I knew it was the key to whatever he never had the courage to say. And I, divorced or not, was about to face the truth we both avoided. My mom was hospitalized on a colder than usual morning. She slipped in the bathroom, and I took her to the nearest hospital right away. When the doctor said we needed to put down a deposit for tests and scans, I nodded instinctively. It wasn't until I stood at the payment counter that I realized my main card didn't have enough limit for the amount they needed. I searched through my wallet. In the middle slot, the card Drew had given me lay still, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. I held it for a second, a strange feeling running down my spine. Why did he give it to me on the day we signed the divorce papers? Why tell me I'd need it soon? And why, here in a hospital, did I actually need something that wasn't even mine? I handed the card to the clerk. She swiped it. The machine beeped an error. She looked up. This card can only be used within the medical support network. Her words froze the air around me. I frowned a little. What kind of card is it? It's not a credit card. It's a restricted account, only for medical expenses that were pre-approved. I looked at the card differently. On the outside, it was as plain as any other card, but inside it seemed to hold a layer of secrets I'd never been prepared to dig into. Why would Drew give me a card meant only for hospital use? Why was it under my name when he was the one who opened and maintained it? And why did he know I'd need it right after we walked away from our marriage? I signed the temporary form, then stepped outside to call the bank for answers. Inside the room, my mom lay waiting for her results, her breathing steady but weak. I glanced through the glass for a moment, then walked away. A bank employee met me at the personal services desk, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a straight posture. I handed him the card and said I needed to check its transaction history. He reviewed it for a while, then looked up, something shifting slightly in his expression. You're Kara Wells? That's me. He turned the monitor toward me, but just far enough that I had to lean in to read it. This account has been funded on a regular schedule, very consistent. For 4 years. I frowned. By who? He answered without hesitation. By Drew Wells. The space around me seemed to shrink for a few seconds. I leaned back in the chair, silent. The man continued. What's unusual is, the only person allowed to make charges here is you. No one else. Not even the person who funded it. I looked up at him, this time genuinely stunned. Why would it be set up that way? The account was configured like that from the start by the person who opened it. He specified clearly, the sole authorized user is Kara Wells. Nothing could have prepared me for that answer. I thought I'd be facing debt, or some missing amount, or a mistake he'd made. But no, Drew was sending money. A lot, consistently. And he chose to take on all of that financial weight in silence. I thanked the man politely, though my voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. When I stepped outside, I stood under the shade of a big tree in front of the bank. The wind swept my hair to one side, almost helping my mind piece everything back together. I opened the list of places the card could be used. It was longer than I expected, but there was one thing every location had in common. They were all hospitals, clinics, and diagnostic centers near where my mom lived. I tapped the screen, scrolling slowly. Each name felt like a hard knock against my memory. Not near my house, not near where Drew worked. All of them centered around one person, my mom. What I felt wasn't pain in the usual sense. It was like standing in front of a truth so big and so quiet that my heartbeat slowed for a moment. Drew had been quietly setting up a medical fund for my mom for 4 years, and I, the person living right beside him, had no idea. I thought about the nights he came home late, the strange receipts, the way he dodged every question about money, all those things that once made me feel shut out of his life. But now, the pieces started fitting together in a way I never saw coming. He wasn't spending recklessly. He wasn't hiding debt. He wasn't taking care of someone else behind my back. He was taking care of my mom. So quietly, it hurt. He opened this account when her health first started slipping, at a time when even I hadn't been ready to admit she was getting weaker. He funded it regularly, like keeping a promise. He worked overtime to maintain it, and he never took a single dollar for himself. I stood there for a long time, no tears, no shaking, just a stillness spreading through my chest, the kind that comes with the truth arriving without warning. I wasn't angry. I wasn't relieved. I just understood. And that understanding was so heavy, I had to brace my hand against the edge of the bench beside me. In some corner of our marriage, even when we felt too far gone to save anything, he still chose to stand on my side, not with words, not with presence, but by carrying the hardest part in silence, when I wasn't looking and when I thought he was avoiding me. I closed my phone and walked back to the hospital. The hallway felt longer than usual. As I passed the room where my mom lay, I paused. Her skin was a little pale, her hand still hooked to an IV line. Everything Drew had done pointed to this moment. He didn't want me trapped between fear and a bill too big to handle. I pulled a chair to her bedside and placed my hand on hers. Her hand was soft and warm. The worry in me eased for one beat, but right then, a realization settled in, cold, clear, impossible to dodge. He left our marriage the same way he lived in it, taking on the hardest part alone, without a sound. I texted Drew a short message, no circling around it. We need to talk. Clinic parking lot. This afternoon. He replied with just one line. I'll be there. When my shift ended, the light had softened. The parking lot was quiet. Just a few cars sitting still in the late afternoon sun. I stood beside my car, hands in my coat pockets, the card still there like a piece of evidence from a truth we'd both avoided for years. Drew arrived on time. He stepped out, closed the door gently, not rushed, not defensive. We stood a few steps apart, far enough that our breaths didn't reach each other, close enough that neither of us could dodge what was coming. I spoke first. You know I've figured everything out. Drew didn't look surprised. He just let out a thin breath. I figured this day would come. No tears, no blame. Just the wind slipping between us. I asked straight out, how long? 4 years. His voice steady, not shaking. I stayed quiet, waiting for him to go on. Drew looked down at the concrete, then spoke slowly. I found out your mom was sick the first time she fainted in the hallway at the old clinic. You were on shift that day. She didn't want to bother you, so she asked me to drive her. When the results came back, the doctor said she needed long-term monitoring. I tilted my head. You didn't tell me because... Drew closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again, no longer avoiding mine. I didn't want you carrying more worry. You already had too much on your plate. I listened, calmer than I expected. No anger rising, no shock, just a truth placed between us, so clear it didn't need extra words. He went on, back then our finances weren't stable. I was scared that one day your mom would need emergency care and we wouldn't be able to pull the money together fast enough. So I opened that account, just so you could use it anytime. He paused, then added softly, and I wanted you to be the only one with access to it. A small spot in my chest trembled, but only for a moment. I asked, then why not tell me? Just one sentence. Drew answered right away, like he'd asked himself that same question 100 times. I was afraid you'd think I pitied your mom, or pitied you. I just wanted to help. I didn't want you to feel weak. I took a long breath. His words weren't wrong, but they weren't right either. I looked straight at him, my voice cold but not sharp. Not sharing is the real burden, Drew. He swallowed once. I went on, It's not the responsibility. It's not the money. It's that you decided for me. If you had told me, I would have understood. But you stayed silent. You always stayed silent. Drew stood there, his arms at his sides, shoulders dipping as if the truth had finally reached him. Kara, I thought staying quiet was how you protect someone you love. I thought if I carried the heavy part, you'd feel lighter. He looked at me with the expression I'd known for so long, kind but lost. I didn't cheat. I didn't get into debt. I just chose the wrong way. I wasn't surprised. I never truly believed he'd betrayed me. What hurt was that he thought I was too fragile to share the weight with him. He cared for me by shutting me out of the deepest parts of his life and mine. I spoke slowly, each word steady. You didn't have to carry anything for me. You just needed to tell me. A marriage doesn't die from being broke or tired. It dies when two people are afraid to tell each other the truth. Drew lowered his head, his hand tightening into a fist. Every night I came home late. I was only working extra shifts to keep that account full, so you wouldn't be alone if anything happened to your mom. He looked up. His eyes weren't red, but they were deep. I'm sorry. That apology didn't fix anything, but it placed a clear period on what we'd both ignored. Silence isn't sacrifice. It's distance. In that moment, I looked at Drew the way you look at someone you once loved deeply but no longer belonged to. I wasn't angry anymore, but I couldn't go back either. Between us was a beautiful effort delivered in the wrong way. And sometimes what breaks a relationship isn't a lack of love. It's a lack of language to express it. I said, "Thank you for what you did for my mom." Drew nodded. I did it for her. And for you, even if you didn't know. I stepped back half a pace, as if marking the final line between past and present. The evening wind slipped into that space, cool and quiet. We're not getting back together, I told myself, and for the first time the thought carried no bitterness, just a simple truth standing there, gentle and clear. Some truths only exist so we can move forward. Drew looked at me, then gave a small nod, as if he could read that thought. No asking for explanations, no request for another chance, no reaching for my hand. He just opened his car door, sat down, and before closing it, he said one last thing. Kara, I just want you to be okay. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He understood. When his car pulled away, I stood alone in the parking lot, but the emptiness I used to feel wasn't there anymore. The truth we'd finally put between us, cold, direct, quiet, was lighter than all the assumptions I'd carried for years. We'd said everything that still belonged to us. The rest belonged to each of us alone. I went back to the hospital the next morning. My mom was propped up on her pillows, looking brighter. When the nurse handed me the new deposit form, I nodded and took out my wallet. The card Drew had given me sat exactly where it should be, like it knew it was doing the job it was made for. I handed it to the cashier. She swiped it. The system flashed, approved, clean, simple, no hesitation. I didn't feel like I was borrowing from anyone. I didn't feel tied to any emotional debt. It was just a fund placed in the right spot, at the right time, for the right person. I stood at my mother's doorway for a long time. What Drew did untied a knot I thought I'd have to handle alone. But it didn't make me go back. It didn't bring tears, regret, or longing. It just planted a quiet kind of gratitude in me. A gentle feeling you don't often find at the end of something. He helped my mother, but I don't owe him. And that's what made my heart feel steadier than any promise ever could. While my mom recovered, I had a lot of time to look back on the marriage that had closed behind us, not with pain, but with clarity. As I cleaned out my small apartment, opening drawers and boxes one by one, each thing reminded me of a part of the story already finished. The more I thought about it, the more I understood. A marriage doesn't end because of betrayal. It ends because of silence. A deliberate kind of silence, the kind you mistake for love, for protection, but that really pushes the other person to the edge. Drew didn't hurt me through what he did. He hurt me by not letting me carry the heaviest parts with him. He thought doing things for me was love. What I needed was to stand with him, not behind him. We didn't fail because we didn't love each other. We failed because we didn't speak. And sometimes the break doesn't come from something big. It comes from the things he didn't say and the questions I grew too tired to ask. In the days that followed, I realized I needed to change. Not because I wanted a fresh start with someone else, but because I finally saw my part in that silence. I'd gotten used to handling everything myself, used to being too strong, used to thinking, it's fine, I've got it. But being strong doesn't mean doing it all alone. Sometimes real strength is knowing when to open up, when to let someone share the weight. I started sharing more with my friends, small things at first, like long shifts, like the worry when my mom needed more tests, not unloading everything, just letting someone step into a corner of my life. And strangely, the world didn't fall apart when I said, I need help. No one thought I was weak. No one judged me. I just felt lighter. I also understood that the next time I step into a relationship, if I ever do, I won't let silence be the solution. I won't handle everything so much that someone feels they have to hide the heavy parts to protect me. I'll speak clearly, honestly, at the right time. Drew didn't teach me through words. He taught me through his mistake. And sometimes, that's the lesson that stays the longest. The day I brought my mom home, she held my hand as she settled onto the old sofa where she always watched her favorite shows. Everything's fine now, don't worry, she said. I smiled. I always worry, but I'm learning how to spread it out. She didn't understand completely, but she smiled anyway, her eyes warm. That night, back in my apartment, I took out the card Drew had given me, turned it over in my hand. Simple, clean, carrying no trace of the things that broke us. I placed it in an envelope and set it in my desk drawer, not to keep as a memory, but as a reminder. Someone can love you quietly, but if the quiet goes too far, you lose each other. I don't regret the divorce, and I don't regret understanding all of this late. Late is better than never. I turned off the lights and looked at my reflection in the window. One chapter had closed, but it left no bitterness behind. He helped my mother in ways I never knew, and I helped myself by moving forward without holding on to regret. I exhaled, light, like I'd finally undone the last knot inside me. Then, as if speaking to myself, but also to anyone who's ever stood on the edge of a breaking marriage, a question formed in my mind, one we should all answer honestly. What do you think breaks a relationship more, the truth or the silence that goes on too long? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really love to hear what you think. That's the end of the story. Thanks for listening.